Vermont socialist Bernie Sanders decided to formally enter the race. It's always stunning to hear what the Muppet-like lefty actually believes.
Beto's got a skateboard and wears Nirvana T-shirts.
Her comments as a sitting senator have been some of the most despicable in Washington.
And let's not forget Princess Running Left, Elizabeth Warren.
Creepy, crazy Uncle Joe Biden. He's facing a serious backlash for, you guessed it, being creepy.
She was literally handed a U.S. Senate seat. Here's a Senate seat. She took it.
Beyond his Boy Scout demeanor and Mayor Pete shtick, Buttigieg is but another creation of a media apparatus desperate to oust Trump.
I'm sorry for that, you guys. It's going to make sense in a second. That is how Donald Trump's favorite network is covering the 2020 Democratic primary race. And we know from Jane Mayer's piece in The New Yorker last month, blockbuster reporting, as only she can do, that Trump is more influenced by those on Fox than by his own White House staff and cabinet. The best display of this was the government shutdown over funding for the border wall, which Jane details like this, quote, on December 19th, with Republicans still in control of both houses of Congress, Trump's staff indicated that he would sign a spending bill with $1.6 billion earmarked for border security. That night, Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh assailed the deal, and the next morning on Fox, they were pounding Trump. By the next day, Trump had refused to sign the spending bill, forcing much of the government to shut down. For the next 35 days, Hannity and the other Fox hosts kept cheering Trump on, even as polls showed that the American public was increasingly opposed to the shutdown. Joining our conversation, we are so lucky, Chief Washington correspondent for The New Yorker, Jane Mayer. Jane, I have been watching the president tweet his rage, his consternation that the Democrats are appearing on my network after the Bernie Sanders thing. He wrote this. So weird to watch Crazy Bernie on Fox News. Not surprisingly, Bret Baier and the, quote, audience was so smiley and nice. Very strange. And now we have Donna Brazile. This obsession with Fox News is much deeper, much more than Trump the viewer. It's Trump as an arm of the Fox News mission, right? That's what your reporting revealed.
And you can see why when you take a look at those clips. I mean, it's basically serving as a kind of an extension of the Trump White House at this point. And, you know, I was watching it, too, along with you, and I was amazed that among the people that Fox turned to have for analysis of the 2020 race is Laura Trump, who, as an expert, she happens to be the daughter-in-law of the president. And I mean, it's so kind of astoundingly unprofessional. You know, what would they say if you had Chelsea Clinton's husband up there sort of handicapping the Trump administration? People don't do this in really distinguished and respected news organizations, but Fox plays by its own rules, and obviously Trump thinks that they're rules that he should help set, which is why I guess he was so dismayed to see that there were Democrats actually addressing audiences on Fox, because no one asked his consent, I guess.
Yeah, he missed the staff meeting where they said, how do you feel about the Buttigieg town hall? I want to ask you about this. I mean, are Democrats sort of turning the president's best weapon back against the president by agreeing to appear? You have Bernie do a town hall. I believe Senator Klobuchar is also in talks to do one, as is Mayor Pete. I mean, is this Democrats trying to co-opt the president's best marketing network?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. First of all, I think there's been a certain amount of misunderstanding about it that I tried to correct this week in a piece, which is the history is that Democratic presidential candidates have pretty much always gone on Fox. Right. I mean, this actually is not something new. I think the controversy stems from the fact that Fox has become ever more seen as a kind of a propaganda operation, so that the ante is rising for Democrats going on it. But they've actually always gone on it, and in a way, I mean, of course, it makes sense, and you can see any number, Axelrod and other sort of political operatives on the Democratic side explaining why over the years. It's a large audience for cable, and it's an audience that, you know, any candidate wants to get every vote that they can get. I actually think it's kind of interesting because, having watched a lot of Fox in order to write about it, I know that the audience doesn't get to see what Democrats really say. It's always coming through this snide filter that's you know, pretty much censoring what they're saying. So when Bernie Sanders actually spoke to the Fox audience, I think the moderators, Bret Baier and others, were kind of shocked because the audience seemed to kind of like some of the things Bernie Sanders was saying about health care, and they looked very taken aback.
It's such a good point. I just want to get your opinion. I mean, I know the debate rages inside the Democratic Party, and I'm not sure it's fair or not about whether or not to participate in a Fox News debate. I understand all the reasons why not, and I think every candidate has to run their own race and appear there if it serves their political needs. But I wonder what you think. Like you, I study it like anthropologically, and I have to say, all Fox News isn't the same. Shep Smith's coverage and Chris Wallace's coverage of both the Barr announcement of the Mueller report and the Mueller report in its substance, and I'd throw Judge Napolitano in there too on the question of obstruction, has been scathing. But just your thoughts before we lose you about the Democratic Party not agreeing to do a debate on Fox News.
Well, what they're not agreeing to is to do a primary debate, which is actually where they've always been. Fox has never hosted a Democratic primary debate where they're all Democrats up against each other. You know, I try as a reporter not to make the political calls for the parties on either side. So, you know, I understand, though, when you watch the coverage, why there's reluctance. I mean, Fox was founded by Roger Ailes in order to be an answer, a much more conservative answer to CNN. And it's slanted. It's purposefully slanted. And, you know, I can see why people have concerns about that and maybe might not want to make this the year that they decide to change the rules and have them host a Democratic debate.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.